This is something that hasn't occurred to me, but Junior pointed it out as we're on our way into Capernaum. You'll notice that the parking lot here is fairly empty. There's a couple of buses here, but normally when we're traveling, even in the off-season like we usually do, and this is off-season compared to summer times and the holidays around Christmas and the like, or Easter, one of those high holy days, normally this place is packed out. In fact, all the tourist places are packed out. But we've caught this sort of butter zone between the war and tourism really getting back into high gear, and everything is wide open, which probably helps in terms of the efficiency of our stopping from one place to another. We can get through without having to deal with huge crowds and long lines. So here we come to Caphernaum, which is Peter's hometown and therefore Jesus' base of operations. This is where he connected up with his closest disciples, Peter, James, John, Andrew. Now, unlike some of the archaeological sites, which are basically run by the Israeli Department of Antiquities, this is a holy site run privately by the Franciscan Order of the Catholic Church. Now, whatever you may think of this church that we see here in Capernaum, underneath it is something very important. The building underneath it, and which you can see from within the church that's being built over here, is a home that is believed pretty solidly to be the home of Peter, and therefore the place where Jesus made his Galilean base of operations. He lived here for several years. We know this because Capernaum, unlike some of the other towns in Galilee, were not destroyed with the revolt in 70 AD, lasting until about the 8th century, at which point you have the Byzantines who had been here to build walls around it. The octagonal section is built by the Byzantines to mark a holy site. And within, they've found glyphs that use early Christian logos. I didn't catch the specifics, whether it was the menorah and cross, whether it was the menorah and fish, or what it was, but there were some things that archaeologists could recognize. But they didn't call them archaeologists back in the days of the Byzantines. They just found these things that were existing and then built a wall as a church around that. And the Franciscans built this church to mark and commemorate the location of Peter's home. I confess, I have never been inside the church. Previously, there has been a service going on in there, which is another reminder of how few tourists there are at the moment. But it also seems like that's not the important place to be. What's important is what's underneath, what's over here, and we'll get to that in a moment, rather than the memorials we've put on top of things. So I guess God the Father was right after all when Peter himself wanted to try and commemorate the Transfiguration. So, which, now that I say that, sounds so absurd. I guess God was right. Yeah, but still, it's just another example of how sometimes we think we know best, and when God decides otherwise, we have a little trouble with that. We think that we can honor him with what we do, and you may say what you like about how beautiful or not this church is, but is it what God wanted? I don't know. One curious thing about this synagogue is the fact that it is the entrance towards which the Jews would face in order to pray, since this is the south facing Jerusalem. Now here on the front of the synagogue, or the main portion of it, we have a few pillars that are still standing, or rather, that were put back up. Capernaum, as I said, lasted beyond the rebellion in 70 AD. but was destroyed by an earthquake in the mid-8th century. And this is what the Franciscan friars found in the late 19th and early 20th century, and had to decide whether to just leave everything lying around or try and reconstruct them. And they seem to have sort of split the difference, putting some things up and, as you can see, reinforcing them from behind. Actually, that pillar looks like it was put up just a few years ago, in fact. We don't remember seeing that the last time we were here. But for the most part, it's been left open air rather than being reconstructed in its entirety. Now, the synagogue that we were walking through dates from the 4th or 5th century. They know this because usually the Jews would prepare for the worst by burying some coins underneath the floor just in case something disastrous were to happen. And archaeologists are aware of this, and they dig up the floor to find out, and found a treasure of coins dating from the 4th and 5th century. But beneath the limestone walls that we have still standing here, there is a section of basalt that was from the original construction that was in existence at the time of Christ. Jesus would have learned and taught within these lower walls at some point.
Down. That was in the synagogue that is below the synagogue that we're in right now. And you can see a portion of what has been excavated here over in this corner. And it was a very important synagogue, but there's some background to it that I want to read to you in Luke chapter 7. So when Jesus had finished saying all this to the people, he returned to Capernaum. At the time, the highly valued servant of a Roman officer was sick and near death. And when the officer heard about Jesus, he sent some respected Jewish elders to ask him to come and heal his servant. So they earnestly begged Jesus to help the man. And they said this, "If anyone deserves your help, he does," they said, "for he loves the Jewish people and even built a synagogue for us." And I believe it's in Matthew where it identifies him as a centurion. So this was a pretty important officer in the Roman army. And he is the one that paid for that synagogue to be built. So that's the actual synagogue that we're talking about that's right below the floor that we're in right now. And so Jesus went with him, but just before they arrived at the house, the officer sent some friends and said, "Lord, don't trouble yourself by coming to my home, for I am not even worthy of such an honor." And that most of you know the rest of the story, that he healed that servant without Jesus actually even getting to his home. But this is the synagogue that is talking about here. And again, time and again, Jesus taught here in this synagogue, which we'll see again. You can very easily see the foundation of that synagogue. The foundation of this synagogue, they essentially used the foundation of the earlier synagogue for the building of this synagogue, except it is extended. We do see that the foundation stones there. So I don't know if the mikveh, that's just the foundation for the mikveh, or the earlier guide we had said that it ended here. I think at this portion here. I don't know.
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Yeah. So the size of that synagogue now, an earlier guide that we had said that the foundation of this synagogue, because you can see the foundation stones there,
Right.
that it ended here where that mikveh began, or is that?
Yeah, but
So
probably
it
the
is
mikveh
small.
was also a part of that.
Oh, okay, all
Or
right.
connected
Because it
to
does look like that's foundation there as well.
Yeah.
So it was still a pretty good size, and you can see when we go on the outside, we'll be able to see the entire foundation, which will let us
Yeah.
see how loud it was.
Now, some of the ruins that have fallen down from the synagogue are displayed here, not built back up, and they show some of the designs that were used. And while it has some that have significance going back to antiquity, like the menorah, there is the Star of David being shown here, that at the time it was created for this second synagogue behind us, didn't have any more meaning behind it than the swastika did on some of the mosaics on the floor. This is a geometric symbol, rather than, of course, trying to create an image that would be the image of God. According to our guide, the first recorded case of the Mogan David as a Jewish symbol was in Egypt in the 11th century when they were marking Jews and Christians by wearing the Mogen David and the cross respectively, and a large one to indicate their dhimmi status as second-class citizens who paid higher taxes in a Muslim country. Though it begs the question as to where the Egyptians came up with the idea of using the six-pointed star. So there are more questions than answers on that one. I know that Junior said that we need to keep the chatter down to a minimum, but I needed to share a few things here. These are the shores of Galilee, right outside of Capernaum. This is where Jesus called his disciples when he started his ministry. This is where he called them again after his resurrection, after they'd gone back to their old lives thinking they'd failed him. He continued to call them, and he continues to call us. It may be the first, the second, or any number of times, but he keeps calling. The question is, how will we answer him?